Hey everyone. So I added something to the database and I thought I'd highlight it, let you all know what it was, and point out I don't really know what to do with it yet. I just thought it was interesting. At this point, think there's more stuff in here than I'll ever get around to testing or using or finding a use for um, before someone else beats me to it, to be honest with you. Let me skip over here and we'll go look at the database as you've got it on the Google Sheet. If you explore it instead of using the tool to explore it to make graphs and stuff on Xeno's website. Um, what it is, I've put them in green because I really don't know how they fit in yet. But I was interested. I was looking at. I'll tell you where it came from. And I thought it'd be interesting to look at it just through the 2019 class since I really don't know how to use it yet. So we'll just look at these guys. Um, I was looking for ways to explore quarterback because not a lot is turning out to be useful right now for predicting quarterbacks for a variety of different reasons. It's just a really tough position. Scout or metrics and analytics. It's just a tough get. Um, but I was wondering if the percentage of production, like almost market share, not really, like the amount of total yards a team was creating through the passing game versus the rushing game. Like you'd expect, just thinking out loud, and this thing when you test things, sometimes what sound logical turns out not to be right. Right. But you have to look at it to find out. So I was thinking that a really good quarterback should lean his team more towards the passing game than the rushing game. Now, obviously, the coaches have a lot to do with play calling, as well as team talent and everything else. That's why, but just as something to explore, I was wondering if there was a pattern in what a quarterback does for his team's production in terms of the passing game. Like, does Russell Wilson, as his career progressed, slowly turn that team's usage away from the rushing game towards the passing game? For example, if that was true, then we'd have something to really bank on. As of yet, I haven't found anything like that. I'm not saying that's true, but that was my thought in creating it. So what I did is I went through my the raw data, and I added up the total team yards, the passing yards, and the rushing yards, and then I found the percentage of the yards that were passing and the percentage of the yards that were rushing, and I also did the same for touchdowns. So I added them into the database here. The first one's called Team Pass Yard MS. It's just the percentage of the team's yards that were actually passing yards versus rushing yards. Um, and I showed how that changed or stayed the same or went down for each year that they were in the database, and then I did the same for touchdowns, so you can see if the percentage of passing touchdowns went up or down at each of their different ages. Um, I thought it was interesting. And I think it might be interesting for wide receiver or running back. If nothing else, it helps to provide at a glance context for what the team was doing. Did the team pass more? Was it gaining more yards through the rushing game or than average or touchdowns? Maybe we could see some regression. I don't know. But I thought it was some pretty neat context. So if you look at Kyler Murray, who just declared, you see that age 19, the team was producing 62% of its yards through the passing game, which leaves 48% or 47.8% being produced through the rushing game. And then in the year 20, they only produced 56% of their total yards. So they actually seem to get them a little more productive through the rushing game. Um, the opposite is true with touchdowns, though, where at age 19 the team was producing 58% of its touchdowns through the rushing game and only 50% of its touchdowns uh, through the passing game and only 50% of its touchdowns at age 20. So they actually decreased. The team was producing fewer of its overall touchdowns through the rushing game. Now that doesn't take into account special team touchdowns or anything like that. It's just pure rushing and receiving it together. Since it was already there, it's fairly easy to do. And like I say, it might help provide context or an interesting perspective on running backs For example, if the team decreased in passing yards, it might say something about what the rushing game was doing and therefore have a bearing on what the player was part of, or at least the context of his production. Same with touchdowns, obviously, and wide receivers and tight ends follow on the same way. But these are pure team stats. Anyway, they're there. If I don't find something to do with them, maybe you all will. I just thought it might be interesting. Just looking through, there were some interesting trends. Like I noticed Russell Wilson, his team's passing touchdowns really dropped down 10-15% in this last year. Again, I haven't checked that out to see if he played less or if something else was going on the team or they had a generational running back all of a sudden. I don't know. But anyway, I thought that was an interesting way of looking at how the team was performing. And so you could compare what the team was doing directly to what the player was doing in different columns. So thought I'd introduce it and explain it, because I'm not sure the title of the column really describes it. Team pass yard MS. It could be anything, right? So anyway, that's what it is. It's in the database. Hopefully we can find some use for it. All right, thanks.